I fear we have to start with the most obvious example, Rogue. Her powers are the first that came to my mind anyway. Simply put, if Rogue has skin-to-skin contact with you, there is a high chance you will pass away, but usually you just end up like close to death, injured, or in a coma. I feel like it goes unsaid why that would ruin your life. Rogue has to wear a special suit that prevents accidental contact until finally Professor X was able to help her control her powers. Rogue's power isn't just absorbing someone's life. She technically absorbs someone's powers, energies, memories, knowledge, talent, personality, and physical abilities. Usually, once you absorb all that, it means you've turned the victim into a shell of a human that will probably die anyway. Her powers apply to any living organic being, and she really does try her hardest to not seriously harm people. There have been times when Rogue has made contact with superpowered beings and gained their powers, sometimes permanently, like what happened with Miss Marvel and Sunfire. While absorbing someone's psyche, she can be overwhelmed by their personality, but when the individual hops back into their own body, she will forget their memories, but they'll always leave sort of an impression. Crystal Frost's power is to create cold, but she has the misfortune of extreme cold also being her weakness. Crystal was accidentally locked in a thermofrost chamber, and when she came out, she had transformed into Killer Frost. She attacked her enemies by generating extreme amounts of cold, even capable of freezing the water droplets in the air. She was able to figure out how to mind control someone by creating a cold fog. She used it successfully on Superman, freezing his ability to reason. Frost once froze the entirety of New York City, but she can also freeze smaller targets too, using the moisture particles in the air. Contrary to other freezers, heat doesn't hurt her, it makes her stronger. Through kissing someone, she absorbs their body heat, freezing them from the inside out. She can also draw on the heat from the atmosphere, and this is all really cool. Not exactly life-ruining though. That element comes in due to her weakness to cold. She literally can't stand the cold, so her greatest strength is her greatest weakness, and personally, I would be so mad. Like, you're telling me that as long as I'm warm, I have vast power, but I have ice powers, and the minute they make me too cold, I go into a coma? Return it. Up next is Bruce Banner's ability to Hulk out. Hulking out, again, it seems really cool until you remember you can't really control it right away, and you might just destroy everything without meaning to, and it has the potential to ruin your life. Eventually, Banner got a hold on his second personality, getting good at holding him back, but it's not a perfect system, and he still hulks out randomly. It really would just suck to always be on the edge and making sure you're in constant control of your emotions so you don't accidentally lose it and destroy a national landmark. Cyclops and his portal eyes that shoot not lasers, but optic blasts that may or may not come from the punch dimension. Sometimes Marvel writers will do something that just makes their lives so complicated, and I cannot help but wonder why. So Cyclops' eyes are potentially portals to this dimension called the punch dimension. It's full of pure concussive force, so every time Scott opens his eyes, he's really just releasing this dimension onto the world. This was initially explained in the first official handbook of the Marvel Universe, but then Marvel went back on it later, saying that he actually got his power from energy absorption. But then later, Marvel tried combining the two by saying Cyclops absorbs energy to be able to open the eye portals, since he is able to deplete his energy. It's not hard to see why having portals for eyes or simply just shooting concussive blasts from your eyes every time they opened would have a negative effect on your life. Super strength is one of those powers that seems really fun in theory, but would kind of be annoying in practice. Just take a look at what Superman and Spider-Man have to deal with. Both heroes have super strength, and both kind of suffer for it. Superman has that pretty famous line from Justice League Unlimited where he says he lives in a world made of cardboard. He is just so strong that if he were to even a little bit let his control slip, he could snap someone in half without meaning to. The same goes for Spider-Man. We learned when Doc Ock took over Peter's body that Peter holds back in every single battle. Doc Ock threw a punch and unexpectedly took off a jaw. If Peter has to work that hard to hold back from hurting villains, imagine the mental gymnastics and strain he puts himself through so he doesn't hurt anyone in his civilian life. Super strength, though helpful and cool, can also be super annoying. Wither, or Kevin Ford's powers, are kind of similar to what Rogue has going on, but worse. If he touches you, it's 100% a death sentence. He can't control his powers at all. Wither's mutant power is decay inducement, which is exactly what it sounds like. Anything he touches starts decaying immediately and eventually turns to dust. Poor Kevin doesn't even stand a chance at controlling this power because the power has like a hunger attached to it. It wants Kevin to use it. It's kind of like a vampire vibe. There is one more piece to this tragic puzzle. Wither's eyes will show him the world in a decayed state, so he really got the short end of the stick here. And actually, speaking of sticks, Wither isn't the only time Marvel has created a character with withering touch abilities. The villains, Styx and Stone, also have this power, Styx rotting any organic matter he touches, and Stone rotting the inorganic matter. There was this one time in a Spider-Man comic when this guy fused with a brick wall and is now known as the Wall. I feel like we can all understand how literally becoming a brick wall might ruin your life. Joshua Waldmeyer was a construction worker that got into an accident on the job and then got to experience one of my irrational fears, his atoms perfectly lining up with a bunch of bricks and him becoming fused with them. Becoming a wall did give him powers like durability and strength and somehow speed despite weighing as much as a ton of bricks. Still, I would rather be me as I am now than have all that and be a brick wall. Johnny D has maybe my least favorite mutation that I've ever seen, the sentient maw attached to him. It's right in the middle of his chest and Johnny has named it the Freak. What the maw does is give Johnny voodoo dolls. If Johnny feeds the maw a DNA sample, like hair, the maw will spit out a doll and Johnny will get full control over that person. And this could be super useful, but it's also not useful enough that I would ever want this power because, sure, eventually Johnny gets full control over a person, but he also has to somehow get a DNA sample from somewhere to start the process. There is a theory that Johnny is not the mutant, but that the maw is, and it's just attached to Johnny. The Freak does have its own brain, so it's a very real possibility. He happened to be one of the only mutants to keep his mutation after Scarlet Witch did the whole no more mutants thing, and can I just say, I would be absolutely furious. Imagine learning that hundreds of mutants lost their powers, but you were still stuck with your chest maw. That would be the start of my villain arc. Johnny is stronger than me. Sometimes people get mutations that do negatively affect their lifestyle, but are also somewhat helpful. Ugly John is not one of those mutants. His mutation was 2 extra faces on his face for a grand total of 3, and they do absolutely nothing except to make his life harder. His nickname is Ugly John, and his real name is Steve, so that does give you an idea of how the poor guy is treated. Literally, the faces don't do anything, they just make him ugly. Imagine your mutant powers manifesting, and this is what you get. That's tough. Professor X makes telepathy look cool, but there are many downsides to it, especially if you are an omniscient telepath like Games Master. Games Master is technically defined as omnipathy. He can control and or hear an infinite amount of minds at all times. His power is so overwhelming that he requires cybernetic enhancements just to keep himself sane enough. Even then, it's hard to exist, but Games Master did discover one thing that helps ease the burden if he really focuses on a distraction, like, for example, putting a bunch of mutants in his version of the Hunger Games. He is able to put the voices out of his mind for a short while. Games Master, in particular, has been having a hard time with his powers because they manifested at a young age, and he had no one around to teach him how to use them. Thankfully, he did go to Krakoa, so hopefully he's been getting some lessons from Professor X, but what do you think? Let us know. Bye!